speaks volumes. His refusal to even mention Shedeur in interviews has sparked questions about what's really happening inside the Browns facility. Reports suggest that the head coach's insecurity over Sanders' growing spotlight has created an invisible wall, one that keeps talent benched and progress. The ex-CEO's revelations of jealousy and internal politics add weight to the theory that this isn't about football anymore. It's about power.
If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed.
The Browns aren't just managing a roster, they're managing egos. The real tragedy is how far that ego-driven management reaches. When decisions are made out of fear instead of vision, teams crumble from within. Sanders represents the kind of transformative potential that could redefine the Browns' future. But if leadership continues to prioritize image over performance, the team risks imploding under its own pride. Until that wall of insecurity falls, progress will remain a rumor rather than a reality. The Cleveland Browns might be walking into one of the most embarrassing stretches in franchise history, and that's saying a lot. Because this time, it's not just about losing games. It's about what's happening behind the scenes. A former Browns CEO has just blown the lid off the organization, and what he's revealing is a cocktail of tanking tactics, ego-driven politics, and flat-out fear. And right in the middle of it all is quarterback Shedeur. Let's get this out of the way. Shedeur isn't some overhyped rookie. He has the mechanics. He has the confidence. And he has the pedigree. NFL bloodline's elite-level processing skills, and the ability to lead under pressure. He's got everything this franchise desperately needs. But instead of being developed, he's being ignored. Or worse, deliberately sidelined. Why? Because according to this ex-CEO, the coaching staff, led by Kevin Stefanski, sees Shedeur not as an asset, but as a threat. A threat to the power structure. A threat to the narrative. A threat to Stefanski's own status in a league where young stars can outshine the people supposed to be shaping them. The message is clear. Stefanski doesn't want to share the spotlight. Shedeur is being smothered in silence. He's barely mentioned in interviews. He's kept out of the media cycle. Access to him is restricted. Clips are limited. Even fan-facing content is noticeably quiet when it comes to showcasing him. That's not a development strategy. That's a blackout. And the reason, according to the insider? Jealousy. Straight-up insecurity from the coaching staff. The fear that Shedeur's star could burn brighter than their own. That kind of attitude doesn't just hurt a quarterback. It tears at the foundation of the entire organization. It doesn't stop there. The Browns' dysfunction goes even deeper. The ex-CEO claims the organization is actively tanking. That they've been offloading veteran talent like Amari Cooper and Joe Flacco to division rivals, not because they're looking to rebuild smartly, but because they're chasing draft picks. That's right, losing games on purpose to move up the board. A front office so focused on the future that they're letting the present burn to the ground. How else do you explain what happened with Dillon Gabriel? The kid was tossed behind a paper-thin offensive line, with no support, no protection, and no real chance to succeed. He was fed to the wolves while Sanders, the more hyped and potentially game-changing option, sat untouched on the bench. It wasn't about giving Gabriel a fair shake. It was about not giving Shedeur his moment. This isn't just poor coaching. It's political. It's protective. It's driven by a culture of fear and pride, a culture where control is more important than competition. The Browns didn't draft defensive linemen despite the glaring need. The trenches are falling apart, and they've done little to fix it. Instead, they're hoarding future assets. Draft picks. Trade leverage. Like they're playing chess 5 seasons from now, while the locker room crumbles in real time. All of it, again, pointing to an organization more obsessed with optics and long-term positioning than actually building a functional team today. This is what the former CEO is calling out. Not just bad football decisions, but a toxic internal culture. One where success takes a backseat to ego. Where fear of change is stronger than the will to win. Where jealousy over a young player's popularity ends up dictating actual personnel choices. And that, more than anything, explains why a talent like Shedeur Sanders is being kept under wraps. Let's be honest, Sanders didn't ask for this drama. All he's done is show up, perform, and represent the kind of promise fans rally behind. But instead of being embraced, he's being silenced. And that silence says everything. Coaches won't speak his name. The media can't get near him. The fans are left guessing. It's like the team is pretending he doesn't exist. And that's no accident. It's damage control. The Browns are trying to keep a lid on something they can't actually contain. Because when Sanders finally steps on the field, and he will, the truth about everything else they've tried to hide is going to surface with him. Every misstep, every bad draft, every ego-driven call, it'll all be exposed. The former CEO doesn't mince words. He sees this as a slow-building disaster, the kind of organizational failure that starts at the top and spreads downward. If the Browns continue down this path, protecting reputations instead of prioritizing talent, they're not just going to lose games. They're going to lose the locker room, the fans, the future, and maybe even Shedeur. Because here's the thing, you can only bury a star for so long. At some point, talent demands recognition. Whether it's from fans, analysts, or other teams watching from afar, people start asking the hard questions. Why hasn't Sanders been given a shot? Why is the team refusing to develop a potential franchise quarterback? Why is leadership this allergic to transparency? Recent match game photos eventually. That spotlight becomes unavoidable. And when that moment comes, the Browns will have to answer for what they've been doing in the dark. The game against the Jets is shaping up to be a tipping point. If the team implodes again, the pressure to finally start Sanders is going to reach a new level. There won't be enough excuses left to deflect the criticism. And if Stefanski and his staff keep resisting that moment, it's going to look less like strategy and more like sabotage. Because that's what this really is, self-sabotage. Wasting reps, wasting seasons, wasting the opportunity to build around someone who could redefine the team's identity. And all because leadership can't stand the thought of being overshadowed. The Browns could change the conversation overnight. They could lean into the momentum. They could own their mistakes, start fresh, and give Shedeur the keys. But that requires humility. It requires transparency. And right now, there's no sign of either. Instead, we're watching a franchise isolate itself from its best chance at turning things around. And if they don't pivot soon, that opportunity might not be around much longer. Sanders has the tools, the demeanor, the presence, the ability to elevate the franchise. But if they keep holding him back, someone else will capitalize on what Cleveland didn't have the courage to embrace. So now fans are left in limbo, watching a team fumble its own potential while pretending this is all part of some plan. Watching leaders dodge accountability while the losses pile up. Watching a quarterback with undeniable upside collect dust on the sidelines while the organization chases shadows of future draft picks. If nothing changes, the Browns won't just be known for losing seasons. They'll be remembered as the team that had the next great quarterback in their building and chose to bury him because their egos couldn't handle the glow. What happens next is entirely in the Browns' hands. But they're running out of time. They can't keep dodging. They can't keep hiding. Because Shedeur Sanders isn't just knocking on the door of opportunity. He is the door. And eventually, someone's going to walk through it. If the Browns won't open it, someone else will. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Is this jealousy from the coaching staff? A dysfunctional power play? Or is the organization actually trying to tank on purpose? Should Shedeur Sanders be the starter right now? Or will they wait until it's too late? If you're fed up with seeing elite talent wasted, hit that like button. Share this video with every Browns fan who knows they deserve better. And make sure to subscribe, because the unraveling of this story, it's just getting started. And let's not pretend the clock isn't ticking. Every week that goes by without Shedeur Sanders taking meaningful snaps is another week of wasted potential. Every press conference where Stefanski dodges the obvious questions, every press release that downplays the elephant in the room, every trust the process statement, it all adds up. Fans aren't blind. Players aren't clueless. And the media? They're circling. The Cleveland Browns aren't just avoiding a quarterback decision. They're avoiding accountability. Because putting Shedeur on the field would force them to reckon with every decision that came before him. The trades, the draft choices, the personnel management, the internal power games. They'd all be laid bare. Because if Sanders succeeds, which many believe he will, it would prove they've been holding back the one thing that could have saved them from this downward spiral. And if he struggles, at least then they can say they gave it a shot. But right now, they're doing neither. They're stuck in this cowardly middle ground where indecision becomes the strategy. And let's not ignore what the former CEO exposed about their internal mindset. This isn't about football anymore. It's about fear. Fear of disruption. Fear of exposure. Fear of being replaced. And in a league where every snap matters, fear is poison. It spreads. It infects decision-making. And it turns opportunity into catastrophe. That's what we're seeing, right? Players like Dylan Gabriel get thrown into unwinnable situations. The offensive line is crumbling. The team punts on O-line, help in the draft, and instead hoards picks like they're chips in a casino. That's not rebuilding, that's stalling. That's the kind of mentality that leads to a revolving door of leadership, of wasted talent, and a broken locker room. And when a franchise starts sending players to division rivals on purpose, that's not just dysfunction. That's sabotage. You don't hand Amari Cooper to a rival unless you've already accepted failure. You don't trade a quarterback like Joe Flacco midseason unless you've given up on competing. That's tanking. Plain and simple. And it doesn't take a football expert to see that. The Browns are playing a dangerous game. They're betting that fans will buy into this long-term strategy, that they'll stay patient, that they'll swallow whatever explanation comes from a podium. But that patience is wearing thin. And this isn't 2017 anymore. This fan base has expectations. They've seen glimpses of what this team could be. And now they're watching it all unravel. All while the most exciting player on the roster, maybe in the entire organization, is kept quiet. Why is Shedeur Sanders treated like a PR problem instead of a solution? Why is he not even allowed to speak for himself publicly? Why is the team so obsessed with keeping him out of sight? It doesn't take much to read between the lines. The attention surrounding Shedeur has become the threat. Not his play, not his practice reps, not his readiness. The attention, the buzz, the spotlight. Stefanski doesn't want to share it. The coaching staff doesn't want to answer questions they can't control. And so the strategy becomes silence. But silence isn't sustainable. Not in the NFL. Not when fans are watching quarterbacks like C.J. Stroud and Anthony Richardson get their shot early and thrive. Not when other teams lean into their future instead of hiding from it. Not when other franchises are taking risks, embracing youth, and turning their quarterbacks into centerpieces, not afterthoughts. And definitely not when the Browns are losing. That's the part no one up top seems to get. If the team was winning, maybe fans would accept the wait. But when the team looks this flat, when the offense sputters and the trenches collapse, and the coaching staff looks lost, you have to try something new. You have to take a swing. And Shedeur Sanders isn't just another option. He's the one everyone's been waiting to see. So what's the holdup? According to the former CEO, it's politics. It's fear of embarrassment. It's fear that Sanders will do well, and that doing well will reflect poorly on the people who kept him benched. That it will make the coaching staff look out of touch. That it will force a reckoning with decisions made months ago. But that reckoning is coming anyway. Because the league moves fast. And players like Shedeur don't stay buried. If Cleveland doesn't start him, someone else will. And if they keep fumbling his development out of jealousy or stubbornness, they're going to have a much bigger problem than a PR headache. They're going to have another quarterback they let slip through their fingers. And this one? He's got receipts. He's already been in the spotlight. He's already handled pressure. He knows how to lead. And most importantly, he knows what he's capable of. This isn't about protecting a young player. It's about protecting egos. And everyone sees it. You think other players in that locker room don't notice who's getting the opportunities and who's not? You think they don't talk? That kind of favoritism, that kind of gamesmanship, it divides teams. It kills momentum. It makes every player question whether performance actually matters. That's how you lose a team. And once you lose the locker room, it's over. Because no one fights for a coach who won't fight for his players. No one buys into a vision that's based on fear. And no one trusts leadership that hides its best weapon out of insecurity. If Shedeur Sanders was allowed to compete, if he was actually given a real shot, this whole conversation might be different. But right now, everything points to a calculated effort to avoid that possibility. The Browns have a choice. Right now. Today. Recent match game photos. They can admit they've been playing scared course correct and finally give Shedeur the opportunity he's earned. Or they can keep pretending this is all part of the plan. But either way, the clock is running out. Because the Jets game is coming. The media cycle is heating up. And the more this story spreads, the harder it gets to control. There is no more room for excuses. No more time for development talk, or he's not ready press lines. The Browns have run out of cover. All that's left is a decision. Sanders, start the quarterback who could save your season. Or don't, and deal with what happens when fans, players, and the football world finally see through the act. And let's not lose sight of what this really is anymore. This isn't just a quarterback controversy. This is a full-blown identity crisis for the Cleveland Browns. When a former CEO is stepping out and saying they're tanking, they're scared of Shedeur, they're sabotaging their own future, that's not speculation. That's a red alert moment for the entire franchise. And yet silence. No pushback from the organization. No meaningful response from Kevin Stefanski. No public defense of the decisions they're making. They're acting like the walls aren't closing in, like the house isn't already on fire. It's not just frustrating, it's pathetic. Because let's be honest, if there were a football reason to keep Shedeur Sanders out of the picture, we'd have heard it by now. Loudly. But instead, all we've gotten is dodging, deflecting, disappearing. The silence is deafening, and it's speaking volumes. You don't smother a player like Shedeur Sanders just to protect him. You don't restrict media access to a top prospect unless you're trying to hide something. And in this case, it's not the player they're hiding. It's themselves. Their mismanagement. Their fear of being exposed. And here's the tragic part. Shedeur doesn't even need to be a savior right now. He just needs the opportunity. He needs snaps. Representatives' growth. You can't develop a quarterback through secrecy and passive-aggressive press conferences. You can't expect a leader to lead from the shadows. But that's what this franchise has chosen, at least so far. And the consequences? They're already showing. Look at the energy on the field. Look at the sideline reactions. Look at the fan base, more exhausted than angry at this point. Because it's not just the record, it's the lack of direction. The sense that the people in charge are more interested in protecting their positions than building a team that actually wins. And the players feel that. The locker room feels that. When your best chance at turning the tide is watching from the bench while the offense sputters week after week, morale dies. The Browns' leadership has fallen into the same trap so many failing teams do. They've mistaken control for competence. They're hoarding picks. They're trading veterans. They're benching the most talented guy in the room. Not because it's smart. Not because it's strategic. But because they're terrified of what will happen if he succeeds. Let that sink in. The idea that Shedeur Sanders could take the field and immediately outshine the current regime? That's the real fear. Because if he plays lights out, then all of it gets exposed. The bad trades. The weak draft classes. The ridiculous media lockdown. The mismanagement of Dylan Gabriel. The culture of avoidance. The tanking accusations. It all becomes undeniable. And you can't put that genie back in the bottle. So instead, they hide. They control. They delay. And in doing so, they're running the clock out on themselves. Because guess what? Shedeur's name is already out there. The attention's not going away. The media's circling. Fans are asking questions. And more importantly, so are other franchises. The more they suppress Shedeur, the more valuable he becomes to other teams. The more obvious it becomes that the Browns are afraid of their own asset. And what happens when he leaves? What happens when he signs somewhere else, takes the field, and becomes the player everyone knew he could be? What happens when Shedeur Sanders becomes the one who got away because leadership couldn't handle being upstaged? We've seen this story before. We've seen teams blow it, pass on talent, let ego outweigh logic. And the Browns are writing that script right now in real time. The difference is they still have a chance to flip the page. They still have a chance to give Shedeur a real shot before it's too late. To stop stalling, to stop hiding, to stop pretending that protecting reputations is more important than winning football games. Because the longer they wait, the louder the fallout is going to be. Fans are already turning. The media has latched on. And inside that building, it's only a matter of time before the players themselves start losing faith in the system. And when you lose the locker room, you lose everything. All of this leads to one unavoidable truth. The Browns are at a breaking point. They can either step into the storm, own their decisions, and unleash the player they've been terrified of. Or they can keep playing defense against their own future. But they need to know the clock isn't just ticking, it's booming. Recent match game photos. The Jets game could be the flashpoint. One more flat performance, one more empty press conference, and the calls for Shedeur won't be calls, they'll be demands. And not just from fans, from players, from analysts, from inside the organization. Because when it becomes this obvious that your best hope is sitting on the bench, and you still won't pull the trigger, that's not strategy, that's sabotage. Let us know in the comments. Should Shedeur be starting now? Is Stefanski playing scared? And if this whole thing implodes, who takes the blame, front office, coaching staff, or both? Hit that like button if you're tired of watching teams waste franchise caliber talent. Share this with every Browns fan who sees what's coming. And make sure you're subscribed, because when the pressure finally explodes, and it will, you'll want to be here for the fallout.